Sweet. Awesome. So we're recording now so we can share this. Jonathan, thank you so much for hosting this for us, guesting on podcasts. I started guesting on podcasts and I was very nervous to do it, right? Like, don't really know what to expect. So I'm really excited to hear all that you have to share with us, and I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooke and Jess. Yeah, happy to share some knowledge bombs today, hopefully. So I put together like a little presentation. I'm going to go full screen mode, but I'll also probably just kind of exit out of that because I want to kind of make this a little bit interactive. So I do want to kind of give you some sort of hypothetical but slightly real life examples of how we might go about searching for the kinds of podcasts that we would want to guest on and so forth. I'm also going to keep the chat open and keep an eye on that. I think, isn't there a thing in Zoom where you can raise your hand like virtually? I believe so. If you're able to discover that, use it, and I'll keep an eye on it. So that way you can kind of interject as well if you like.
It's in the participants. If you click the participants button, there's a raise hand in there.
Yeah, you guys are all pros at this by now, I'm guessing. Good stuff. Okay, so I'm just pulling my notes up. Fantastic. So yeah, the presentation. Oh, by the way, can everyone see my screen? Podcast guesting, hands up if you can. All right, okay, I'm getting some thumbs up too. Okay, excellent. So I thought I kind of split this up into three kind of main sections. By the way, I do have until about, I think we're scheduled to do it from 2 to 2:30. Is that Eastern time? Is that correct? Okay, I see nodding of the head. So I'm going to try and go to about 2:20 or just a bit over that to give some time for questions at the end. But yeah, I thought of splitting this up into three sort of sections. First, the why guest on podcasts? Like, why does it make sense to guest on podcasts? Why not just like guest blog or something like that? Where to find shows to guest on? And finally, how to go about it, how to do your outreach, how to connect with podcast hosts. First, just a little bit of background about myself. So I run a podcast production agency, and I'm usually on the production side, although increasingly these days, people are asking me for more advice around how to actually get on shows. So that's sort of an area that I'm transitioning a bit into. And so this is really just a chance for me to kind of share, everything that I've learned about podcast guesting so far, and the tactics and strategies that I've used with my clients to get them on shows. I worked in podcasts since 2013, kind of good timing, worked on some pretty high profile shows. Nowadays, with millions of downloads and so forth, nowadays I actually work on shows that are a lot smaller, like really, really way smaller, but primarily sort of in the B2B business to business service. Basically, most of my clients, they provide services for other businesses. So first of all, why podcasting? Why does it make sense to guest on podcasts? So first of all, if we just look at the demographics of podcast listeners as a whole, they tend to skew younger. They also tend to skew to higher education. And finally, they tend to be more affluent. So those are just some characteristics. The red bars here, this is kind of like the average US population. The blue is the younger age. I can see things in the chat. This is great. Keep it coming. I'm just noticing this just now. Yeah, younger demographic, absolutely interesting. This is sort of the digital savvy audience. So millennials, just kind of podcasting had its boom just at the time when millennials started tuning in. So that's one thing. That's sort of just general. This is a very sort of broad averages, right? So not every show is going to have this, but overall, these are the sort of audiences it's attracting. Second of all, podcast listeners tend to be pretty loyal, and it's a very different medium from, say, YouTube, Instagram, a lot of other social media, in that people don't follow thousands or hundreds or thousands of other accounts. They basically subscribe to at most 11 shows, but on average about 6. And that's kind of important when you think about it. So when you're actually speaking on a podcast, you're speaking to someone who most likely sort of tunes in regularly, or they've established this kind of relationship with the podcast where they listen in, they trust the host, etc. And they have this sort of, they go back to it. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. Also, podcast listeners tend to listen all the way through episodes. So as opposed to kind of the drop off that you might see in YouTube, this is kind of like a typical graph that you'll see for YouTube views, is people just drop off after the first few seconds. This just happens all the time. And it's funny, actually, in YouTube, I think it's like, I can't remember, it's like 3 or 5 seconds in, that's counted as a view. Whereas with podcasting, it's a minute in. If you go past a minute, it's actually counted as a listen. So this is interesting. It means that basically, your efforts aren't going to waste, even though sometimes, you might appear on shows that, or you might guest on shows that have small listenership bases. It's very deep. So you have to think about podcasting as something where people will consume the content long form, and you have to kind of think about it as going deep rather than broad. And there's really very few other mediums out there where people will just give you that level of attention. So secondly, let's move on to the where. So, okay, great. We've decided, we really want to get into podcasting. Great. Where do we find these shows that we want to guest on? So first off, I suggest, now I'm kind of thinking of this in the perspective, typically with my clients, I would ask them, well, find out what kinds of shows that your clients are. Now, substitute clients with audience or followers, etc. Or you want to go and seek out and just ask the people that you're trying to reach, that you may already have relationships with, what kinds of shows do they listen to? Also looking, in Facebook groups where your client base, your target client base lives, or subreddits and so forth, other kinds of online discussion forums where you can go and find what podcasts people are recommending. You can search there. You can also just post the question as well, like, hey, does anyone have any podcast recommendations for me? Secondly, also seeking introductions. So if you have people within your network who've been in the show, and you think that show would be a good fit for the message that you want to deliver, by all means, you can talk to your friend or that person in your network and ask them, hey, would you be willing to introduce me to this podcast host? Because really, the warm introductions are the ones that are going to be the most effective, as opposed to just reaching out to people completely cold. So try and leverage that as much as you can. In terms of sort of, doing research, looking into shows where, let's say you're, I don't know, a personal finance author, right? And you're looking for other kinds of, shows about personal finance to guest on. A good tactic is to spy on your competition. So go after the Ramit Sethi's of the world, or what other kind of, personal finance people, you consider as being, really relevant to your niche, and search for them. I suggest, obviously there's the Apple Podcasts directory, which is kind of been the main podcast directory, but I would suggest actually using one of these two search engines for podcasts. And the reason is Castbox does a really great job of indexing podcasts, for one. It's a Chinese venture-backed company, which is a little bit odd, but they did this really great job of indexing a show. So I'm just going to take an example. By the way, if you have any examples like this that you'd like me to search for, just shoot them in the chat. But I'm just going to pick Ramit Sethi. Let's say we're a personal finance blogger or an author, and we want to promote our new book, etc. Okay, here we go. Actually, let's pick this one instead. Kirsten Heyer. I have no idea who this person is, but I'm going to try this one instead. Tyler just mentioned this one in the chat, so let's look them up. So Kirsten Heyer. Let's just Google her so I can get customer success. Okay, so it looks as though she is the founder, CEO, client retention, exception, she's an expert in this field of customer success, I'm assuming. So if we just search for her in castbox.fm and just look at the episodes, this will index all the shows that she's been on. It looks as though she has her own show, obviously, so this one's kind of mentioned quite a lot. But say, for example, this is a show that she's guested on. Now, the neat thing about Castbox in particular is, okay, so we can see she's guested on this show.
Welcome.
But if we go to the podcast page itself, we can also get an indication of how popular this podcast is as well. So this kind of information you won't find in a lot of places. You do find it on Castbox. It gives you some indication of the popularity of the show. It's not a full picture. It's only a very small slice of the pie. But this will give you some indicator. So once you start building this list, and you can start putting these shows on a Google spreadsheet and you can start prioritizing them based on these kinds of figures. So that's one good kind of indication. The second one, listen notes here. I'm going to look up this lady as well. So basically with Castbox, you go down and you find all the other shows. It looks as though to me, based on these results, she's just been on this one show, but it could be that Listen Notes gives us something different. So Listen Notes is basically a podcast directory. It has transcript. It allows you to save shows to playlists as well, which is kind of cool. You can kind of actually generate your own podcast through a playlist. It will give you an RSS feed that you can add to your own player, which is handy as well as when you're doing kind of research. Again, it looks as though she's just on the one show. But Listen Notes also gives you kind of easy access to stuff about the show, like, okay, it's been going since February 2016. You've got this many episodes and this and that. So that's also helpful for your research as well. So basically, you want to kind of build your list of all these different shows. Another good place to look is on the Apple Podcast Store, obviously. Apple Podcasts is kind of the main gateway to podcasts. And this is the directory that most podcast player apps use. So it's kind of the main podcast directory. After that, you've got sort of Spotify, and Google Podcasts is now kind of indexing all podcasts. But Apple Podcasts still remains kind of the main directory. And they have this sort of new and noteworthy section. Now, I don't know, Apple Podcasts has kind of done this this funky thing where they've moved a lot of stuff around. So it used to be you had a new and noteworthy section for each subcategory. But nowadays, so if we just kind of go into subcategory, I'm just going to choose business, for example. It's now called new shows in this subcategory. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems as though new and noteworthy seems to have kind of disappeared from the subcategories. Now the new shows, this will sort of give you an indication of some shows that are up and coming. I do recommend keeping an eye on this and looking for shows that come out. And the reason why the new shows are interesting is because they'll be easier to approach. They haven't received a ton of pitches. And if you're able to secure a show that will eventually have a really big following, you'll get a steady flow of traffic for years to come. If you think about the Joe Rogan show, like, what are the chances of getting on Joe Rogan right now? Very minimal. But if you went back to, I can't remember, like years and years and years ago when it started, try to get on the Joe Rogan show, you might have a better shot at getting on it. So with that said, there is also a little caveat to this new section in Apple Podcasts. What you'll find is with a lot of these shows, they aren't new at all. So if I just take this one here, like Apple Podcasts is just a little bit broken, if we're honest, you know, because look, this is like the last episode for this one is like December 2019. You go all the way back. You know, this is an oldish show, I guess. Maybe that's where the noteworthy comes into play. But there so yeah, you have to kind of go around. You will find shows that are actually new. So this one, for example, okay, this is more like it. You've got, you know, just the 4 episodes and it's relatively recent. This is actually a new show. So this is another sort of gauge for good shows to target, but with those caveats. So going back to a little presentazione here. So if you go back in, another place to actually look is Amazon. You might think, what the heck does Amazon have to do with podcasts? Well, if we go back to this example of mine where, let's say, whatever niche it is you're in, like let's say personal finance, you might look at, if you search on Amazon for books by authors within your niche or other experts, you can start sort of finding other authors that have written similar books, and then you can then sort of cross-reference that and start searching for them on the podcast directories. So again, this is all just like a very much, you know, a list building process. Another sort of good gauge for popularity is Chartable. So Chartable is a platform that will basically aggregate all the chart rankings for a show. So someone tell me what their favorite show is in the chat. I'm not sure if Hungry for Guests is a podcast or that was one of the oh, there we go. My Favorite Murder. Fantastic. Thanks. Work from team. I'm assuming that's either Jess or Brooke. But let's say if we, okay, so let's take, I'm assuming it's this first one here. So if we pick any show here, it will show you all the reviews here. Obviously, this is a very polarizing show because we've got people giving it 1 stars and 5 stars and whatnot. So this looks quite interesting, but you'll see also their chart rankings in all these different countries. Neat thing about Chartable is this data is not actually available if you just go by the Apple Podcasts. Like you can see the charts, but that will only be for your country, wherever you're located. So this also gives you a very good indication of what people are saying about it, what people like about it, and so forth. So again, that's a good sort of gauge when you're trying to prioritize the shows that you want to be on. Where are we? Okay, cool. So next thing is, you know, once you have that list, obviously you want to prioritize it. And what we usually do is we dump all this stuff into some kind of like CRM tool. Now there are millions of different tools around here. I'm sure you probably have your own favorite, or if you haven't come across one, I would recommend if you're just getting started, like Streak is great because that just kind of fits straight into your Gmail. And it's a relatively easy kind of process to onboard and figure it out. Another one worth mentioning is yet another mail merge, which is basically a Google Sheet extension, which is really powerful, even in just its free offering. It allows you to do these kind of mail merge. So basically you can bulk email people, but personalize that message at the same time by using fields and parameters. So like, hello, first name, really, you know, I'm really interested in your podcast, and you have the podcast name, etc. Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, another mail merge, Streak are really good options. Yeah, another mail merge will also allow you to do follow-up emails within that Google Sheet. It will allow you to basically do a second campaign of follow-up emails to people who haven't replied to your message. So it will actually detect that for you, which is pretty cool. Something a little bit more advanced is and a little bit more pricier is Pipedrive. So plug it in and you can start doing your outreach. Now, next question really is, just sort of backtracking a little bit. It's also worth looking into some of the podcast directories out here. Here's a selection: Spot a Guest, Podcast Guests, Podit, Podchaser Connect, which is currently in beta. They're good places to be on. Some of them are sort of pay to play. I think Podchaser Connect is free for the moment, so it's Spotify. The other two are paid. But these will basically connect you with hosts as well. So great. Okay, we've got our list. Fantastic. Now you might be wondering, okay, how do we actually do our outreach? Like, what do we put in our messaging? How do we entice these podcast hosts to actually have us on? So first off, like one really worthwhile asset to have in your arsenal is kind of like a one-pager or one sheet. You can do this in the form of a website. I really like this example of what this lady here has done. I have no relationship to Katya. I just came across her. I don't know how I did. But she has this page, which I think is really worth having a little browse around, because if let me just find the, okay, just pulling up the URL for her. Her page has all these really super helpful things for podcast hosts. And if you're not a podcast host, like how many people would actually really think of this? But she does things like, you know, she says, okay, she's got like a couple of her bios, you know, okay, this is her main bio. Here's an alternative bio. So you can give people different kinds of bios to play with. Most of the time, you know, podcast hosts, they got lots of things to do. They're, you know, managing show, and they'll probably just read your bio word for word. So you might want to kind of mix it up a little bit. You might want to have one or two, or depending on the kind of audience you're speaking to, etc. You might want to highlight different things, change up your messaging. Second thing she has here, which I think is really great, is you know, how to pronounce her name. You know, it may seem very straightforward, but just stuff like this is just super helpful for hosts. That's a question you'll probably always get, you know, during your interviews if you don't have this. How do you pronounce your name again? She's got her contact information here. I would say this is maybe a little bit of overkill. You know, I might just have one main channel rather than spewing loads, but you know, it's up to you. She's got a lead magnet here, which is really, really great thing to do. Having a general lead magnet, like having a lead magnet in general, is a really, really great idea. And during your podcast interview, you can kind of, you know, really provide value for your audience, but give them a way of, you know, give extra resources or something like that, which will also help you stay in contact with them, you know, build your list and so forth. So okay, so I've got Brooke here saying, what's a lead magnet? A lead magnet is basically a means of attracting leads. So basically people who might fit into your target audience, or, you know, people who are interested in what you have to share. It's a way of attracting them to your mailing list. And it's usually done by means of sort of exchanging some kind of free gift, you know, like a free download, a free checklist, how to do this or that. So for example, in the case of Katya, she's got a self-paced guide to scaling a digital marketing agency. And so I'm assuming that in, you know, all likelihood in her interviews, she's kind of giving sort of little kind of tidbits and hooks and like, this is what you can achieve and blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, boom, if you want the guide for it, this is where you go. And she'll drop that link in the episode. Having a general one is great. What's even better is if you can have one that's very specific for the audience. And this takes a little bit more work. Maybe you might have a virtual assistant or like a team or, you know, content person working with you. But you can, what's really effective and what podcast hosts and audiences love is where you make them feel special. You know, you're like, you prepared this special lead magnet that's just for that audience. So having something that's specific and where you can kind of work together with the host and say, hey, I'd love to give something special for your audience. Like maybe it's a huge discount or a free thing or this or that. And you get them to basically set up a pretty link. So you get them to set up so let's say you're on the, I don't know, the Helping Sales Radio thing. And let's say their website is helpingsalesradio.com and you're Katya. Well, maybe it's like helpingsalesradio.com/Katya. And that forwards to your lead magnet sign up that's specific to Helping Sales Radio audience. It's like, and you basically like rebranded your entire lead magnet to specifically to the sales radio audience. It's like audiences want to feel special. They want to feel as though they have this relationship and you're giving something specifically to them. Other stuff that Katja does really well here. She's got loads of topic and question ideas, which is really great, and so forth. Anyway, there's a lot to be learned here. I'm not going to go on about this. Oh, also, but just to mention that she has, again, these are things that may seem very obvious, but just like really good headshots. You would be surprised how many hosts, and I'm talking like hosts on like, high profile shows just have like really crappy like headshots, so like super low res, and you're doing the social media stuff and you're just like, oh man, really? So this stuff makes a really big difference. Having different kinds of formats, like generally it's usually the square one. Episode images in Apple Podcasts, look this up, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's like, I think it's like 1,400 times 1,400, which is like super high res. Even though like on most players, it's like the images turn out really small for whatever reason. That's like their specifications. But yeah, all this stuff is good. I won't bore you with that. And I'm realizing that it's super pressed for time. I do have a lot of other things left, which I'm just going to just quickly run over. Another way of approaching this sort of one page, one page or one sheet is to do something pretty zany like this. Having like some kind of downloadable PDF that you can attach to your outreach emails is really effective. And often, podcast hosts, they'll pull up your email that you originally sent and, just before the interview, and they're just like, okay. They just pull up your one pager, start reading off it. So this can be really effective. And okay, this looks pretty funky, but I'm pretty sure this guy just went on Fiverr and found someone who could use Illustrator. So this is also something you can do. I do have some guidelines around sort of messaging and emails and what goes into it. Like a very brief thing about just on the subject of equipment. Don't use your computer microphone. Just do not do that. You'd be surprised how many people do that as well. I've had sort of best-selling authors you've done hundreds of podcasts and they turn up and they just use their microphone off the computer with the fan whirling and you're just like, what? Don't do that, please. At the bare minimum, you can do actually what I'm doing, which is just using, earphones and microphone. And then sometimes that's just the best thing to do because that's what you're familiar with. You just plug it in and your microphone's working. And as long as it's not just bristling against your collar or whatever. But otherwise, get one of these ATR 2000. I get my numbers mixed up, but I think it's like the ATR 2100. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's kind of like the base standard microphone, which will actually get you really decent sound, kind of get you and it's $60 basically, but it will basically give you 80% of the best sound quality you could possibly get. After that, it's very slow increments. So you can go from a $60 microphone to a $200, $300 microphone or $500, like the Shure SMB 7B. But to be honest, like the increase in quality is marginal. It's like, so fork out $60 and get a microphone like this. This is the Samsung Q2U, very similar to the ATR 2100. It's actually a teeny tiny bit cheaper, I think, but actually more or less the same quality, or actually even I think a little bit better. The good thing about these microphones as well is they're XLR and USB, so you can just plug them in with USB. And then if you want to upgrade to the next level, you might get like a mixer and plug that into your computer, but that's just getting super complicated. Just get this USB mic, plug it in, use some earphones or headphones so you don't get microphone bleed. So I do realize I'm speaking very quickly, but I'm just aware that the time has gone past 2:30. So I think it's maybe time to just kind of go back into the Zoom room and just see if anyone has any questions. Right. So work from team. Jess, Brooke, do you want to kind of unmute people and see if anyone has any questions?
They should be able to.
Okay, cool.
Folks should be able to unmute, if they have a question. It looks like Tyler has his hand raised. I don't know if that was from before, but
Ah, cool.
Yes. I'm curious, Jonathan, thank you very much for all that knowledge. Like, I'm definitely at the beginning of this journey in terms of like wanting to be perceived as a remote leader and somebody that wants to be, you know, out there and doing stuff. So like, gosh, just, you know, like serendipitous timing of like you just having this talk. So thank you very much, first of all, for dropping the knowledge. But second, the thing that I'm curious about is the thing that you ended there with is equipment. Is that a thing that you can advertise to a host? It's like, yeah, I'm not some idiot. Like I've actually got like legit equipment, and you're not going to have to like spend hours editing the fan noise out of my my audio.
That's a really good question. In principle, I would say yes. I would say though, like on your outreach email, like when your sort of first contact with hosts, I mean, by all means, do try and drop it at some point, drop it in conversation. But the thing about emails is you want to be really brief. Like you don't want to give people walls of text and give them information, like any extra information they don't really need to know. So, but one way you might do that, which I think is very effective, is you could do what I've seen work really well is when people embed video. So you can use a program called Loom. I don't know if you've come across Loom before.
I'm a Loom user.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if you like embed like a little Loom video in your email, and it will show up that little GIF, and maybe you mention it in there, and maybe you're using the, you're using your mic or whatever. That's kind of a good way for people to go, okay, this guy, because I know what you mean, because, and
how do you signal it? How do you signal it? I'm not some low rent, know nothing, non-technical, like jamoke that's going to make it hard for you,
Yeah. So on that one page or that one sheet, you could include testimonials, like where people say, oh, like if you've been on a show, you say, hey, would you mind giving me a testimonial and maybe dropping in that I know how this rodeo works, for example. That's one way of doing it. But, basically just being presentable and like being on video. The video thing works well as well, because it makes people kind of go, especially like right now, people want that kind of face-to-face connection, and you'll stand out by doing it, because how many emails you receive a day where someone's actually talking to you on video? Not so many, right? So yeah, I would definitely recommend that. There's a story actually, I just wanted to mention quickly. I was at a podcast conference some time ago, and I was talking to a podcast host, and they said to me, and this killed me. They were like, oh, I only interview other podcast hosts. And I was like, why? And they're like, because they know how to use their equipment. And I'm like, that's such a cop-out. And that's the reason why we keep hearing the same people on the podcast all the fucking time. Yeah, and it pains me to say that. But another way of doing this is actually have your own show. And I know, starting your own podcast, that's a bit of an endeavor, but it could be like a kind of a short series. Maybe it's something where you talk about your expertise, and you can kind of drop that in. You can say, hey, I have my own show. And maybe the kind of, you might specifically refer to an episode where you talk about content that's relevant to that audience that you're trying to speak in front of. Yeah. So, yeah.
I have a question, Jonathan.
Sure.
So once you're going to be on a podcast, is there tips you have for like being a good guest, whether it's ways to be memorable, or just like, don't forget to do this, like, don't forget to say like, your lead magnet or your website, or just something like, a way to be a memorable guest? Or you trying just any tips around that, like being on it? Because at this point I've just kind of like, it stresses me out too much. So I just wing it and have a conversation. And so I don't know if there's much strategy to that. So I was curious if there was just any little tips.
Yeah. I would say winging it and having a conversation in one respect is actually a good thing. Like not treating it completely like it is an interview and just being very conversational is a good thing. But I would also really think about just making sure that you're addressing things that are like, the conversational stuff is fine, but people are listening in for a reason. They want to be educated or entertained or informed. So really think about just delivering as much value as possible. You know, the old like Gary V, like jab, 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 right hook. I'm not a massive Gary V fan, but it's that kind of idea of, you know, try and just deliver as much value and information and generosity as much, and it will come across. People will appreciate that. That's,
Cool.
yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problemo.
Anyone else have any last questions before we wrap up?
I'll add something real quick. This is Scott. This is kind of not about getting placed in a podcast. It's about producing a little bit. And any shortcuts to editing audio pieces, the kind of general principles for like intro, outro, and like a tight edit. Like, is there software that you recommend that is the easiest to use? I totally realize this is not topically directly in line.
No, this is totally fine. You have lots of options.
Yeah.
There's some really great stuff out there. I mean, are you interested in like I don't know, like the tech platforms that will shortcut a couple of things for you, or
pretty much. I have a lot of content, so I'm ready to publish something. And by the way, thank you. But all the tools that you already mentioned and the resources are fantastic. So, and I wouldn't mind guesting. So this kind of piqued my interest. But yeah, I know it's like, it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the low quality, like you definitely you judge a podcast the second somebody opens their mouth, right? If it's tinny, if they sound like they're 2 blocks away on a beach or something, you know, you judge it. So kind of, but there is kind of a high-low thing, right? So that you mentioned the $60 mic. I'm kind of in the same area when it comes to editing. Like I'm probably going to do it myself, likely. So yeah, something relatively easy, but you know, polished enough to be professional.
My top recommendation for editing is don't get someone else to do it, because and you know, that's really, it's the most time-consuming thing. And there are, you know, there are different tiers, you know, sort of editors you can go for, and you can get good, decent editors relatively cheaply. You can go in places like Fiverr, Upwork, so forth. It may be a little bit of a trial to, you know, find the right one, and sometimes they may not be so reliable. But to be honest, like, go down that route because it will save you so much time. That's one thing. Just in the general, like, very detailed editing, because to be honest, like my agency, what we do, like 80% of our manpower is spent on editing out ums and ahs. And it's like, do you really want to is that how you want to spend your time? It's definitely not what I want to spend my time. That's why I train other people to do it for us. Obviously there's, you know, and there's a whole bunch of other things you have to do on top of that with podcasting. So I would really look into outsourcing that as soon as possible. Having said that, there are a lot of tech platforms that are making this way, way more easier for people. So one is this platform called Descript. And what Descript is it's a little bit of a cheat. It's a little bit of a hack, but basically it transcribes your audio and then it allows you to edit it as if you're editing a Word document. And it's pretty good. And it does all these other things. Like, it will actually synthesize your voice, and you'll be able to like type a script and it will read it out for you. So it's quite spooky like that. They're trying to avoid the deep fake scenario, so you can't do other people's voices. But there are tools like that. And I would say, you know, we actually considered it for our own agency, but I found there were just like a few little things that just weren't quite there. So we'll give you like tip top quality, but it will be pretty decent. I think we get a little bit too hung up on audio quality as well, because the most important thing is really the content. You know, that's what people are listening in for. And myself included, even though I'm an audio nerd, and I can tell if someone's on they're on a dinky little freaking microphone or talking to the ruddy, you know, thingy computer. I'll listen to super shitty audio and I just don't really care. Sorry about my language. But like, I'll give you an example of a really great podcast that has terrible audio quality. Seth Godin's Startup School. It's like a seminar he gave where someone put the microphone on at the back of a room, and it's a terrible recording, but it's gold dust, you know, just the information that comes out of it is just, insanely valuable.
Yeah. And the context of something like that, you just feel like you caught him, walking out of a conference because he's already a rock star. So it's kind of, yeah.
Just one other platform. I know I'm like, I could talk until the cows go home, but one other platform really worth looking into is a platform called Orphonic, orphonic.com. It's a platform where you basically just kind of upload your audio to the cloud, their servers, and it will do automatic noise reduction. It will do leveling, so make sure the volumes are adjusted. It will do it will filter out loads of rubbish and stuff like that. And you can also set up presets, so you can link your Google Drive or Dropbox, and you can define what's your intro and your outro, and assign all the metadata and create these presets. So it just saves you tons of time and makes your audio sound way better.
Cool. Thank you.
And we'll do one more. Daniel put a question in the
group. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I was just asking about pacing, editing for pacing your audio.
So pacing in terms of audio editing.
No, I mean the pacing of your actual speaking, because I've heard a lot of podcasts that I feel like they put too much of a gap between the things they're saying, and it's okay, I like listening to you, but I also don't like wasting my time. So I don't know.
I think I think this is a little bit subjective. It might matter a lot to you, but will it matter to most other people? I'm personally a big fan of I'm actually a fan of long pauses, but maybe not for the reasons that you might expect. For one reason, it means that people say less. And so that one of the reasons why people pause so much is they're just trying to prevent those tics, those oral tics that people do. And I prefer pauses over ums all the time. It makes it a lot easier to edit as well. But secondly, a lot of podcast player apps as well will actually remove most of the silence. So Overcast will do this. I think quite a few others as well. So how important is it? I don't think it's that personal. This is a personal thing, and maybe for you it's more important. And it depends. This is also contextual as well, because this is for some shows. Maybe it's for, I don't know, most of what I do is interview shows. I deal with interview shows. But if it's a narrative show where the pacing is kind of a little bit more important because it's part of that narrative and there's a much more of a focus on it, it's completely different. I don't know if that really answers your question, but what I'm trying to say is it's subjective. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. This was so much awesome information. Before we jump off, I'd love to give you a chance. Is there anything you'd like to promote or let us know what you're working on? I know you put some stuff in, but just wanted to give you another chance before we sign off.
No, I think that, I just love to, I've just really, appreciated this opportunity. I really love to connect with people in the community. I haven't been super active in it. I have scouted a couple of locations, and I'm based in New York, so I'm always on top of the New York channel. But I'm always, keen to geek out in podcasting. I'm happy to just jump on, calls, discovery calls, take a look. If you're thinking of launching a show, I do a free pre-launch audit. And then of course I have, all my, my services. But it's mainly sort of the production side of stuff that I work on, but I also do consulting around this and everything else related to podcasting.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. We'll post the recording, so feel free to share it. And then also if you feel like posting your slides too, I know some people after other ones have requested that, so that would be awesome too.
Sure. Happy to.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining.
All right.
Great.
Cheers.
Have a good day.
You too. Cheers.
Bye.